The chain scraped against frozen earth like fingernails on stone. Each labored breath from Aurora's trembling body created small ghosts in the December air. Wisps of life fighting against Vermont's merciless cold, -15 degrees. Her amber eyes tracked another car passing on Maple Ridge Road. Hope flickering, then dying as taillights disappeared into the gray twilight. A bread crust lay 3 inches beyond her reach. 3 inches that might as well have been 3 miles. Her German shepherd frame, once proud and powerful, had collapsed into sharp angles of ribs and matted fur. The chain, heavy with ice, had worn a raw circle around her neck. Then brake lights, a truck slowing, hazard lights blinking orange against the snow. Through the windshield, Ethan Miller's eyes met Aurora's. In that frozen moment, her tail attempted one desperate, weak wag before her legs gave out completely. The message was clear. Please, before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. The town of Millbrook, Vermont, population 847, prided itself on 2 things: surviving winters that could kill the unprepared and looking after its own. But on this December evening, with temperatures plunging to -15 degrees, both traditions seemed to be failing. Maple Ridge Road stretched lonely through the outskirts, where farmhouses sat far enough apart that screams wouldn't carry but close enough that gossip always did. The Lawson farmhouse stood like a forgotten bookmark in time, white paint peeled in long strips, revealing gray wood beneath. The mailbox overflowed with unopened bills and newspapers dating back 3 weeks. Christmas decorations from last year still hung in tatters from the gutters. What had once been the pride of Jack Lawson now looked like grief had taken physical form. Ethan Miller, 38, knew about grief-wearing disguises. His hands, steady now on the truck's wheel, had once trembled holding his dying canine partner in Kandahar. 6 years stateside hadn't erased the weight of that failure. Working with Vermont Animal Rescue filled some of the hollow spaces, but not all. Never all. His worn Carhartt jacket and work boots marked him as local, but his eyes carried distances that had nothing to do with geography. The dog in the yard wasn't just any dog, even through neglect. Aurora's bearing showed her German shepherd lineage and something more: training, discipline, purpose abandoned. At 6 years old, she should have been in her prime. Instead, matted fur couldn't quite hide scars along her flanks, and her ribs created shadows that had nothing to do with the fading light. Margaret Lawson. Maggie, to those who'd known her when she taught 3rd grade, had once been the woman who'd organize meal trains for sick neighbors. At 72, she moved through her house like a ghost haunting her own life, following routines whose purposes she'd forgotten but whose patterns remained etched in muscle memory. Behind darkened windows next door, Walter Hayes, 68, watched everything and said nothing. The retired police canine trainer hadn't left his property in 6 months except for groceries. His son Daniel's flag, folded in a triangle, sat on the mantel where Christmas stockings once hung. And 30 miles away in Boston, Sarah Mitchell, 45 and Maggie's only daughter, deleted another voicemail from Millbrook's area code without listening. Ethan's boots crunched through the frozen crust of snow as he approached the Lawson farmhouse. The porch steps groaned under his weight, and he noticed the newspapers still in their plastic sleeves forming a small mountain against the door. The oldest visible date read December 2nd, 3 weeks of news nobody had bothered to collect. The doorbell had been broken for years according to the duct tape note beside it, so he knocked, the sound hollow against wood that needed painting. Shuffling footsteps approached from inside. The door opened 6 inches, stopped by a chain lock that looked recently installed. Maggie Lawson peered through the gap, her gray hair uncombed, wearing what appeared to be the same house dress she'd worn to church last Easter, the last time anyone remembered seeing her in town. Yes. Her voice carried suspicion, but no recognition, though Ethan had helped Jack repair their barn roof just 2 summers ago. Mrs. Lawson? I'm Ethan Miller. I noticed your dog needs help. Her face twisted in confusion, then something like fear. I don't have a dog. There's some stray that keeps showing up, aggressive thing. I chain it so it won't attack anyone. She started to close the door. Ma'am, wait. Ethan glimpsed the interior dishes piled in the sink visible from the door. Mail scattered across the floor. The television playing to an empty room. The dog has a collar. Could I look at it? You can't trust strays. Maggie insisted. They carry diseases. Jack always said. She stopped mid-sentence, blinking rapidly. Ethan returned to Aurora, kneeling beside her in the snow. The dog didn't lift her head, but her eyes tracked his movements. With gentle fingers, he found the collar beneath the matted fur in ice. The tags clinked together, a rabies vaccination tag from 2019, a town registration, and a heart-shaped tag engraved with Aurora on one side. He flipped it over. His stomach dropped. If found, returned to Jack and Maggie Lawson, with this very address. When he knocked again, Maggie answered as if for the first time. Can I help you? Mrs. Lawson. About Aurora, your dog. The name triggered something. Her face crumpled like paper. Jack is Jack home. He was supposed to feed the dog. I told him. She trailed off, searching Ethan's face for answers he couldn't give. Jack's at the store, isn't he? He's getting her food. Ethan's throat tightened. Jack Lawson had been dead for 18 months. The legal reality hit him like the cold wind. In Vermont, animals were property. He couldn't simply take Aurora without Maggie's permission, and Maggie clearly wasn't competent to give it. But animal cruelty laws existed too. The question was whether confused neglect qualified. Mrs. Lawson, Aurora is very sick. She needs a veterinarian. I don't have a dog, Maggie repeated, her voice mechanical now. Someone should call the pound about that stray. The door clicked shut. Ethan returned to Aurora, this time examining her more closely. The paw pads were cracked and bleeding, leaving red marks in the snow. Each rib was countable through the fur. When he offered his hand, she licked it once with a dry tongue, the gesture taking enormous effort. The chain had left the fur worn away around her neck, skin raw underneath. But it was her eyes that broke him, not pleading anymore, just resigned. Movement caught his attention. Walter Hayes stood at his kitchen window next door, watching. They made eye contact for a moment before Walter stepped back into shadow. But he didn't close the curtains. Ethan pulled out his phone. In a small town like Millbrook, calling authorities on a neighbor was nearly unforgivable. The sheriff was Tom Bradley, who'd gone to high school with Jack Lawson. The animal control officer was Tom's cousin. Everyone knew everyone, and private struggles were meant to stay private. But Aurora's labored breathing made the decision for him. As he dialed, he saw Walter had returned to his window. This time, the old man gave a single, small nod. Tom, it's Ethan Miller. I'm at the Lawson place. We have a situation. Sheriff Tom Bradley's cruiser pulled up behind Ethan's truck, its lights painting red and blue patterns across the snow-covered yard. Tom stepped out slowly, his brown uniform crisp despite the late hour, his weathered face showing the conflict of a man about to intervene in a neighbor's life. At 45, he'd grown up with Jack Lawson, played high school football together, attended each other's weddings. Now he stood in Jack's yard, about to make decisions Jack would have hated. Ethan. Tom nodded, his breath visible in the freezing air. Heard you called about the Lawson place. The dog. Tom. Ethan gestured toward Aurora, still lying in the snow, her breathing increasingly labored. She's dying. Tom's professional assessment took seconds. The chain, the protruding ribs, the bloody paw prints in the snow. His jaw tightened. When did Jack pass? The question caught Ethan off guard. What? Jack Lawson. He died 18 months ago. Massive heart attack at Gardner's grocery. Thought everyone knew. Tom's eyes moved to the farmhouse where Maggie's silhouette moved past a window. Sarah, their daughter, was supposed to come back from Boston, handle things. Haven't seen her in over a year, though. 18 months. Ethan looked at Aurora with new understanding. 18 months of Maggie's declining mind being the dog's only caretaker. 18 months of a faithful animal waiting for an owner who would never return. Can we just take her? Ethan asked, The dog needs immediate medical attention. Tom pulled out his clipboard, already knowing the legal maze ahead. Animals' property in Vermont. Can't remove without owner's permission unless there's clear evidence of abuse or neglect. Maggie's still the legal owner, but if she's not competent. She doesn't even remember having a dog, Ethan interrupted. Called Aurora a stray. Said she chains her to prevent attacks. Tom approached the farmhouse, Ethan following, through the door's chain gap. They could hear Maggie talking to someone inside, except no one else was there. Mrs. Lawson, it's Tom Bradley, Sheriff's Department. Maggie appeared at the door, her confusion deepening. Sheriff, did something happen to Jack? Is he at the station? Tom's face softened with pity. Ma'am, I need to ask about your dog, Aurora. I don't have a dog. Jack might have a dog. You should ask Jack. Her voice carried absolute certainty. He'll be home soon. He's getting milk. Tom exchanged glances with Ethan. The legal gray area was clear. Maggie owned the property and everything on it, but she wasn't mentally capable of making decisions. Without power of attorney present, removing Aurora required careful documentation. Mrs. Lawson, there's an animal in medical distress on your property. I'm authorizing emergency removal for immediate veterinary care. Good, Maggie said firmly. Strays carry diseases. Jack always said so. Tom filled out the emergency removal order, his handwriting careful and legal. The wind picked up, sending snow swirling around them. In the distance, Christmas lights twinkled on other houses, a stark contrast to the neglected Lawson property. One more thing, Tom said, turning to Ethan. The dog's collar. Mind if I check it? Together they returned to Aurora. Tom knelt beside her, his flashlight illuminating the tags, but his trained fingers found something else, a small metal cylinder, barely visible, attached to the inside of the collar. What the hell? Tom muttered, carefully unscrewing the cylinder. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a folded piece of paper. Ethan held the flashlight as Tom unfolded the letter with gloved hands. Jack Lawson's careful script filled the page, dated just a week before his death. To whoever finds this, it began. If you're reading this, I'm gone, and someone needs to know the truth about Aurora and Maggie. The letter detailed Jack's desperate plan. Maggie's dementia had started 2 years ago, progressing faster than expected. Jack had hidden it from everyone, even Sarah, hoping to honor Maggie's wish to stay in their home. But he'd known his heart was failing. The doctors had given him months at best. Aurora isn't just a pet. The letter continued. I've been training her based on Daniel Hayes' service dog manuals. Danny left them when he asked me to watch Aurora after his injury. She's learning to be Maggie's memory, reminding her to take pills, eat meals, stay inside when it's cold. Tom's flashlight trembled slightly. Daniel Hayes had been Walter's son, killed in the line of duty 2 years ago. Aurora had been his canine partner. The letter revealed more. Aurora saved Danny's life before he died. Took a bullet meant for Officer Murphy. Danny made me promise to care for her. Said she deserved peace after everything she'd sacrificed. But she can't rest. She keeps working, keeps serving. Now I've given her an impossible task: protect Maggie when I'm gone. God forgive me. The final paragraph made both men stop breathing. Walter Hayes is Aurora's emergency contact. He has legal papers Danny signed. But Walter won't take her too much grief. The dog reminds him of his boy. So Aurora stays with Maggie, and Maggie forgets her more each day. If someone finds this, please understand Aurora chose to stay. Even when Maggie stopped recognizing her. Even when the food stopped coming regularly. Aurora never tried to break that chain. She could have Danny trained her to escape any restraint. But she won't abandon her post. She's waiting for someone to relieve her of duty. Tom looked toward Walter's house, where a single light burned in the kitchen window. Son of a bitch knew all along. We need to get Aurora to the vet now, Ethan said urgently. The dog's breathing had become more shallow. As they carefully lifted Aurora into Ethan's truck, her collar tags caught the light. One tag they hadn't noticed before gleamed dully, a police shield with a number K9 Unit 7823. Below it, barely visible, were the words, Hero First Class. Tom stood watching as Ethan prepared to drive away. "There's more to this," he said quietly. "Sarah Mitchell has power of attorney, has had it for 6 months. She's been cashing Maggie's Social Security checks from Boston." "You're kidding me." Bank manager mentioned it last month. Thought it was strange. Sarah not visiting but handling all the finances remotely. Tom's expression darkened. "And there's something else." Daniel Hayes had a life insurance policy for Aurora's care. $30,000. The beneficiary was supposed to manage it for the dog's medical needs. "Who's the beneficiary?" Tom's eyes moved back to Walter's house, then to the farmhouse where Maggie stood confused at the window, and finally to Aurora's still form in the truck. "That's where it gets complicated. The money's been sitting untouched for 2 years. He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The beneficiary refuses to acknowledge it exists. Says accepting it means accepting Daniel's really gone." Through the truck window, Aurora's eyes flickered open for just a moment, focusing on something in the distance, Walter's house, where a figure now stood at the window, watching. The examination room at Millbrook Veterinary Hospital smelled of antiseptic and fear. Aurora lay on the stainless steel table, too exhausted to react to the cold metal against her skin. Grace Thompson, 34, with gentle hands that had saved countless animals, worked methodically through her assessment. Each revelation made her jaw tighten further. "Malnutrition, obviously," she murmured to Ethan, who hadn't left Aurora's side since the emergency removal 3 days ago. "But it's worse underneath. Severe dehydration, hypothermia, damage to her extremities. These infected wounds on her flanks aren't from the chain, they're older. See the pattern? Those are healed bite marks, probably from other dogs." Grace shaved a patch of fur to insert an IV, revealing more scars. "This beautiful girl has been through hell more than once." She found the microchip with her scanner, frowning at the result on her screen. "That's odd. The chip isn't registered to the Lawsons." The database returned a different name entirely. Hero K9 Unit 7823, Vermont State Police. Handler Officer Daniel Hayes. Grace's intake of breath was audible. Everyone in Millbrook knew Daniel Hayes had been killed in the line of duty 2 years ago. "That's Walter Hayes' son," Ethan said quietly. "He lives next door to the Lawsons." Grace pulled up Aurora's service record, and they read in stunned silence. 47 successful drug seizures, 3 commendations for bravery, a Purple Heart equivalent for being wounded protecting her handler. The final entry stopped them cold. Handler deceased. K9 retired to civilian adoption, Jack Lawson, approved by Officer Hayes prior to death. Aurora hadn't eaten since arrival, refusing even the premium food Grace offered. "It's not uncommon in cases of severe depression," Grace explained. "She's given up. Dogs can die of broken hearts, Ethan. Without intervention, she has maybe a week." The story had exploded across Millbrook by day 7. The Millbrook Gazette ran Aurora's photo on the front page, "Forgotten Hero Found Freezing." The image, Aurora's service photo next to her current state, sparked outrage. Within hours, the veterinary hospital's Facebook page was flooded with donation offers. Tom Bradley fielded calls from animal rights organizations demanding prosecution. "It's complicated," he explained to yet another reporter. "Mrs. Lawson has dementia. She's not a criminal, she's sick herself." The town meeting on day 8 packed the community center. Mayor Janet Hopkins struggled to maintain order as neighbors argued. Some defended Maggie as she'd taught their children, organized their fundraisers, held their hands through tragedies. Others demanded justice for Aurora. "Where's her daughter?" shouted Marcus Flynn, whose son had been saved by Daniel Hayes. "Sarah Mitchell hasn't visited in over a year. She left that poor woman to deteriorate alone." "That's not our business," countered Beth Simmons. "Family situations are private." "Not when an animal suffers," Marcus shot back. Reverend Michael Garrett from First Methodist stood up. "What does it say about Millbrook if we can't protect both our elderly and our animals? This isn't about blame, it's about fixing a broken system." Donations poured in. Millbrook Elementary's third graders, who'd been taught by Mrs. Lawson years ago, raised $300 selling hot chocolate. The VFW offered to repair the Lawson farmhouse. The Women's Auxiliary organized meal deliveries for Maggie, now temporarily relocated to a local care facility for evaluation. But Sarah Mitchell, contacted repeatedly in Boston, sent only a terse email: "I cannot take time off work. Please handle the situation as you see fit. I'll deal with legal matters remotely." The security footage was discovered by accident. Grace had installed cameras in the recovery ward to monitor patients overnight. When she reviewed Aurora's file from the past 4 nights, she noticed a pattern in the parking lot footage visible through the window. Every night at exactly 11:47 p.m., a figure appeared outside the chain-link fence. Ethan recognized Walter Hayes immediately. Despite the darkness, the old man would stand at the fence for exactly 1 hour, sometimes sitting on an overturned bucket he brought. The audio was faint, but they could hear him talking a low, steady murmur like a bedtime story. "I started looking back," Grace said, pulling up older footage from the clinic's external cameras that happened to overlook the Lawson property in the distance. "He's been doing this for months. Ethan, look." The grainy footage from 2 months ago showed Walter at the Lawson fence line. He'd leave items, blankets. They realized. Every morning, the footage showed Maggie removing them, confused by their appearance. "One more thing," Grace added, enhancing a frame from 3 weeks ago. "See what he's carrying." It was a bag of premium dog food, the same brand found scattered in the Lawson yard, the food Maggie thought was attracting strays. On day 9, Ethan confronted Walter. The man answered his door looking older than his 68 years, wearing the same flannel shirt he'd apparently worn for days. "You've been trying to help Aurora all along," Ethan said without preamble. Walter's shoulders sagged. "Danny loved that dog. When he was dying, the gunshot wound took 3 hours. Aurora stayed pressed against him. Wouldn't let the paramedics near until Danny ordered her to stand down." His voice cracked. "She was covered in his blood, but she never left him." "Why didn't you take her after Jack died?" "Jack asked me to let him try first. Said Aurora could help Maggie, maybe trained as a service dog. I should have known when Maggie started deteriorating." Walter's hands trembled. "I couldn't face her. Aurora. She has Danny's eyes. The way she looks at you. Like she's still waiting for him to come home. She's dying, Walter." "I know." The admission came out as a whisper. "I sit outside that fence every night like a coward, talking to her about Danny, telling her she's a good girl, that it's not her fault. But I can't take her home. Danny's room is exactly as he left it. His uniform is still on the chair. If Aurora came home, I'd have to accept he's really gone." They stood in silence, 2 men bound by different losses. Finally, Walter spoke again. "I have letters. Dozens of them. Danny wrote to Aurora from the hospital, like she could read them. Said he was going to adopt her officially when he got out. Had Jack keep her as a favor until he recovered." A bitter laugh. "He never got out." "Aurora needs you," Ethan said simply. "No," Walter corrected, his eyes focusing on something beyond Ethan's shoulder, perhaps the Lawson farmhouse, perhaps the past. "She needs Danny. And I'm not him. I'm just the shadow he left behind. And that's not enough. It's never enough." That night, the security footage showed Walter at the fence again. But this time he'd brought something new. He pushed a worn leather collar through the chain-link Danny's K9 unit collar from their working days. Aurora, barely able to move in her kennel, had lifted her head when Grace brought it to her the next morning. For the first time in a week, her tail moved, not quite a wag, but acknowledgement, recognition, memory. The blizzard warning came at 3 a.m. on Christmas Eve, but Aurora was already gone. Grace discovered the empty kennel during her early morning rounds, the emergency exit door banging in the wind, its lock somehow open from the inside. The security footage would later show Aurora, still weak from surgery just days ago, methodically working the latch with her teeth, a K9 escape technique Danny had taught her for emergency situations. "She's going to die out there," Grace shouted into her phone, alerting everyone while pulling on her coat. The temperature had dropped to -20, with visibility near zero. Her surgical site isn't even fully healed. The tracks in the snow told a clear story, a straight line from the veterinary hospital toward Maple Ridge Road. Aurora wasn't wandering. She was going home. Going to Maggie. Ethan joined the search, driving slowly through the whiteout conditions. Tom Bradley coordinated from his cruiser, calling in off-duty officers. But it was Walter who knew where to look. "She's gone to the farmhouse," he said with certainty when Ethan called him. Danny always said Aurora had an internal compass for duty. She knows Maggie's alone. They found them at 5 a.m. Maggie Lawson lay in the snow 20 feet from her front door, wearing only a thin nightgown and slippers. She'd wandered out, confused, calling for Jack to help with Christmas preparations. The cold had taken her down within minutes. But she wasn't alone. Aurora stood over her. The German Shepherd's body curved to create a windbreak, her black and tan fur covered in ice. The dog was shaking violently, her legs barely holding, but she hadn't moved. She'd positioned herself to take the worst of the wind, her body heat the only thing keeping Maggie from freezing to death. "Jesus Christ," Tom breathed, rushing forward. Aurora's amber eyes tracked their approach, but her lips pulled back in warning when Tom reached for Maggie. Even dying, she was protecting. "Stand down, Aurora," Ethan said firmly, remembering the police commands from Danny's letter. "Good girl. Stand down." The German Shepherd's legs gave out then, collapsing beside Maggie but still maintaining contact, still guarding. Her breathing was labored. Ice crystals forming around her nose. The surgical incision had partially opened, blood staining the snow. As paramedics loaded both of them into separate ambulances, Aurora tried to follow Maggie's stretcher, dragging herself forward until Grace sedated her. The last thing the dog saw before unconsciousness was Maggie being driven away. Sarah Mitchell arrived at the hospital 6 hours later, her rental car sliding into the parking lot just as the morning news crew was setting up. She looked exactly like what she was, a Boston professional completely out of place in a Vermont crisis. Her charcoal business suit was wrinkled from the drive, her designer heels immediately impractical in the snow. She pushed through the crowd of concerned citizens who'd maintained their vigil despite the blizzard. "Where is she?" Sarah demanded at the reception desk. "Where's my mother?" But her first stop wasn't Maggie's room. It was the administrative office, where she cornered Ethan, who'd been coordinating with the donation committee. "You," she said, her voice sharp with accusation. "You're the one who started all this. The news stories, the fundraising. How much have you collected?" 15,020. Ethan's shock was genuine. "The money's for Aurora's medical care and your mother's." "Oh, please," Sarah interrupted, her Boston accent sharp. A sob story about a dog, and suddenly everyone's opening their wallets. You saw an opportunity with a confused old woman and you took it. Where's the money going? Mr. Miller, into your rescue organization. Your mother was dying of neglect, Ethan said quietly. Aurora too. Where were you? Sarah's face flushed. Don't you dare judge me. You don't know anything about... I know you haven't visited in over a year. Walter Hayes stood in the doorway, still wearing the same green flannel he'd worn for days. His presence filled the small office. I know you've been cashing Maggie's checks from Boston while she struggled alone. Sarah turned on him. And who are you? I'm the father of the officer whose dog was keeping your mother alive. Walter's voice broke. The dog who just nearly died saving Maggie again. My son Danny. He stopped, swallowing hard. Danny died 2 years ago. Aurora was his partner. She took a bullet for another officer the day Danny was killed. Your father was caring for her as a favor to my boy. The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. Sarah's carefully constructed anger began to crack. Your mother has been calling for you, Walter continued. Not by name, she doesn't remember names anymore. But she keeps asking for her daughter. Describes you perfectly. Brown hair like autumn leaves, she says. Blue eyes like your father. She calls you sassy. Sarah's hand went to her mouth. She hasn't called me that since I was 12. She called you that an hour ago, Walter said, right before she asked if you were coming home for Christmas. The sob that escaped Sarah echoed through the office. Her designer armor crumbled as she sank into a chair. I couldn't watch it. After Dad died, I visited once and she didn't know me. She asked me to help find her daughter. She was looking right at me and asking where Sarah was. I couldn't lose her over and over again every time I visited. So I stayed away. I'm a coward. We're all cowards, Walter said quietly. I've been watching Aurora suffer from my window for months. Too afraid to help because she reminds me of Danny. But that dog never stopped serving. Never stopped protecting. Even when everyone failed her. The legal meeting convened at 2 p.m. in the hospital conference room. Tom Bradley presided unofficially, with the county social services representative, a patient advocate, and Grace Thompson providing medical input. The question on the table: what happens to Aurora and Maggie now? Mrs. Lawson needs full-time memory care, the social services representative stated. She can't return to independent living. I have power of attorney, Sarah said, her voice steady despite her red eyes. I'll manage her care. From Boston? Tom asked pointedly. No. Sarah's answer surprised everyone. I'm moving back. I've already called my firm. And Aurora? Grace interjected. She's recovering, but the stress of the situation is killing her. She's stopped eating again. Her vital signs drop every time she hears Maggie's voice from down the hall but can't get to her. The dog comes with me, Walter said suddenly. Danny would want me to. She's my mother's dog. Sarah interrupted. Legally Vera, she's Danny's dog. Walter's rare anger flared. My son bled out holding her leash. Enough. The voice came from the doorway. Maggie stood there in a hospital gown, an orderly behind her looking panicked. Her eyes were clearer than they'd been in months, focused with a lucidity that shocked everyone. That dog, Maggie said slowly, each word deliberate, needs her family, all of her family. She looked at Sarah. Hello, Sassy? You came home? Sarah rose, tears streaming. Mom, I don't remember everything, Maggie said, her moment of clarity already flickering. But I remember that dog saved me. I remember Jack loved her. And I remember. She frowned, searching for words already fading. I remember she's good. She's such a good dog. She looked at Walter. Your boy, police officer, he visited Jack. Walter nodded, unable to speak. The dog misses him, Maggie said simply. She looks for him, like I look for Jack. Grace checked her tablet, Aurora's monitoring data live on the screen. Her heart rate just spiked. She can hear Maggie's voice through the ventilation system. Maggie turned to the orderly. Take me to the dog. Ma'am, you need to return to your room. It's Christmas Eve, Maggie said with surprising firmness. No one should be alone on Christmas Eve, not even dogs. Tom Bradley stood. There's a solution here. Walter, you have the legal standing as Aurora's designated emergency contact. Sarah, you have power of attorney for your mother. The vet bills are covered by the community fundraising and Danny's canine insurance. What if? An alarm started beeping from Grace's tablet. Aurora's vitals are crashing. She's giving up. Grace looked at the group. She's dying of a broken heart. Whatever you're going to decide, decide now. Sarah grabbed Walter's hand. Together. We do this together. You take Aurora, but she visits Mom daily. I'll manage Mom's care. But I need your help. We become... She struggled for words. A family of necessity. Walter's eyes filled with tears. Danny would like that. Then it's decided, Tom asked. No, Maggie said, her clarity fading but her determination strong. Not decided until someone tells that dog she can rest. She's been on duty too long. Grace pulled up Aurora's video feed on the conference room screen. The German Shepherd lay still on the medical bed, eyes closed, machines beeping steadily but slowly around her. "How do we tell her?" Sarah asked. Walter stepped toward the screen, his voice carrying the authority of his canine training years. "Aurora, Hero First Class, Canine Unit 7 and 823. On the screen, Aurora's eyes opened slightly. "Your watch is ended," Walter said formally, using the retirement words Danny had never gotten to say. "Stand down." "Good girl." On the monitor, Aurora's tail moved once, weakly. Her eyes focused on something beyond the camera, perhaps Danny. Perhaps just the peace of finally being released from duty. Then the heart monitor flatlined. Christmas morning arrived with a pristine blanket of snow that made Millbrook look like a postcard. Grace Thompson had volunteered to check on Aurora, leaving her own family's celebration to tend to the German Shepherd who had captured the town's heart. She entered the recovery ward humming Silent Night, carrying a small wrapped gift, a new collar she'd bought with her own money. The humming stopped. Aurora lay motionless in her kennel, her breathing so shallow it was barely visible. Grace's trained hands found a weak, thready pulse. The dog's gums were pale, almost white. Internal bleeding. Grace recognized the signs immediately. "No, no, no," she whispered, carefully lifting Aurora onto a gurney. "Not today. Not like this." The emergency call brought Ethan within minutes, still wearing his Christmas sweater, a gift from his niece. Dr. Robert Chen, the senior veterinarian, arrived with a surgical team, interrupting their own holiday meals. As they prepared Aurora for surgery, Dr. Chen's ultrasound revealed the devastating truth. "Massive internal bleeding," he announced grimly. "There's an old injury here, scar tissue around her spleen that's ruptured. This isn't from the neglect. This is older. Maybe 2 years." Walter Hayes stood in the doorway, having somehow heard the news. His face went white. "February 15th, he said hoarsely. 2 years ago. The day Danny died." Everyone turned to him. Walter's words tumbled out. "A confession held too long. Aurora was shot that day. Same incident that killed Danny. The suspect fired 3 times, one hit Danny in the chest, one went wide, and one," he gestured weakly at Aurora. "She jumped in front of the 3rd bullet meant for Danny's partner. They did emergency surgery, removed part of her spleen, said she'd recovered. But the vet warned us any severe stress or malnutrition could cause the scar tissue to fail. The surgery would take hours." Word spread through Millbrook like wildfire. Their Christmas Eve hero was fighting for her life on Christmas morning. By noon, the veterinary clinic's parking lot had filled with cars. People stood in the cold, holding candles they'd brought from church services, waiting for news. Marcus Flynn led a prayer circle. Beth Simmons, who'd argued for privacy at the town meeting, wept openly. Children made get-well cards with crayons on the hoods of cars. The Millbrook Elementary Choir, assembled impromptu, sang carols in the parking lot. Tom Bradley directed traffic as more people arrived, some from neighboring towns who'd followed the story. "She saved 3 officers that day," Walter told the gathered crowd, his voice carrying across the cold air. Danny was already down. Aurora was wounded but still working. She took down the shooter, then collapsed. They worked on Danny for 3 hours. Aurora lay next to him the whole time, bleeding internally, never whimpering, never leaving her post. Even when the paramedics tried to treat her, she wouldn't move until— his voice broke. Until Danny stopped breathing. Only then did she let them help her. Inside, Dr. Chen worked with methodical precision, repairing damage that should have killed Aurora already. The scar tissue had created a web of problems, complicated by her recent malnutrition. Her body had been consuming itself, weakening the old repair until it finally gave way under the stress of her rescue and the emotional trauma of change. Maggie Lawson's collapse happened simultaneously, as if connected by invisible threads to Aurora's crisis. The care facility called 911 when they found her unconscious in her room, burning with fever. The ambulance passed the veterinary clinic on its way to Millbrook General, and someone in the crowd whispered, "That's Mrs. Lawson." At the hospital, doctors diagnosed severe pneumonia, likely from her night wandering in the cold during the blizzard when Aurora had escaped to find her. Her age and weakened condition made it critical, but worse than the physical illness was her mental state. The infection triggered complete cognitive collapse. She no longer recognized anyone, not even her own reflection. "Jack," she called out in delirium. "Jack, the dog needs feeding, that nice dog. Where's the nice dog?" Over and over, a broken record of confusion and loss. Sarah Mitchell arrived on the evening train from Boston, her face a mask of professional composure that cracked the moment she saw her mother. Maggie looked through her daughter as if she were a stranger, then asked her to please find Jack because the dog was hungry. "Mom," Sarah whispered. "It's me. It's Sarah." "I don't know any Sarah," Maggie replied firmly. "But if you see Jack, tell him about the dog. She's such a good dog. She reminds me to take my pills." "Did I take my pills? Jack knows about my pills." Sarah broke down in the hallway, the weight of 18 months of avoidance crushing her. "I couldn't watch her forget Dad," she sobbed to the nurse. "I couldn't bear seeing her lose him over and over again every day. So I stayed away. I'm a coward. A selfish coward." The nurse, Patricia Hayes, Walter's sister-in-law, placed a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Grief makes us all do things we regret. The question now is, what you do next?" The revelation that Maggie had been calling for Aurora, not just a dog, came from the care facility's notes. Despite her confusion, she'd been asking about specific things. Did the dog get her breakfast? Did someone check the dog's water? Was the dog warm enough? Even in her dementia, some part of her remembered the responsibility, if not the reason. Walter Hayes did something then that shocked everyone who knew him. He walked into Millbrook General, past the rooms where his son had died, through hallways that held his worst memories. He found Maggie's room and sat beside her bed, the first time he'd voluntarily visited anyone in 2 years. "Mrs. Lawson," he said softly, "Aurora is being taken care of." Maggie turned to him, and for a moment, her eyes cleared slightly. "The police dog, Danny's dog?" Walter nodded, tears streaming down his weathered face. "Yes, Danny's dog. She's a good dog," Maggie said with certainty. "Jack promised to watch her. Is Jack coming?" "He sent me instead," Walter managed. "To tell you Aurora is safe." Maggie smiled then, the first peaceful expression anyone had seen from her in days. "Good. She gets scared in the cold. Dogs shouldn't be cold." She drifted off to sleep holding Walter's hand, while he sat there crying for his son. For Jack. For Aurora. For all the connections that death and time had severed, but somehow couldn't quite break. At the veterinary clinic, after 4 hours of surgery, Dr. Chen emerged exhausted, but hopeful. "She's stable. We repaired the damage, but the next 24 hours are critical." The crowd in the parking lot erupted in cheers and tears. Church bells rang across town. Tom Bradley had called every church to spread the word. Aurora had survived surgery, but she remained unconscious, machines helping her breathe, her body fighting a battle that medicine could only partially assist. Sarah arrived at the clinic after leaving her mother's bedside, finding Ethan maintaining his vigil beside Aurora's recovery kennel. "Is she, fighting?" Ethan replied. "Just like your mother. Just like all of us." Sarah looked at Aurora, seeing for the first time not just a dog, but the living connection between everyone's grief and love, loss and hope. "I've been in Boston pretending none of this was happening. Dad would be ashamed of me." "Your dad would understand," Walter said from behind them, having followed Sarah from the hospital. "We all deal with loss differently. Danny wouldn't visit me for 6 months before he died, said I reminded him too much of Mom after she passed. I never forgave myself for those lost months. Don't make my mistake, Sarah." The three of them stood watching Aurora breathe, each breath a small victory against the darkness that had nearly claimed her. Outside, snow began falling again, and the crowd in the parking lot began singing Amazing Grace, their voices carrying through the walls like a prayer made audible, a community refusing to let go of hope, even as tragedy tried to claim their Christmas. The day after Christmas, Sarah Mitchell climbed into her mother's attic searching for insurance documents. Instead, she found a box labeled "Jack's Things Do Not Throw Away," written in her father's careful handwriting. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was Jack's phone, the one they thought had been lost when he'd collapsed at the grocery store 18 months ago during his fatal heart attack. The phone still had battery, miraculously preserved in the cold attic. Sarah's fingers trembled as she scrolled through the videos, dated starting 3 years ago. The first one stopped her breath. Jack's face filled the screen, his expression serious. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone and someone needs to know the truth about Maggie." The camera turned to show Maggie in the kitchen, putting car keys in the refrigerator. Third time this week, she doesn't remember doing it. Video after video chronicled what Jack had hidden from everyone. Maggie forgetting their anniversary, getting lost coming home from the grocery store, crying in confusion when she couldn't remember their daughter's married name. Each video was dated, documented, evidence Jack had gathered not for legal purposes, but to track the progression of what he clearly knew was dementia. January 15th. Jack's voice narrated over footage of Aurora performing tasks. "Watch what she does." The video showed Aurora nudging Maggie's hand at 8 a.m., leading her to the kitchen where pills were laid out. Aurora sat until Maggie took them, then led her to the calendar, touching it with her nose. "I've been training Aurora based on Danny's old service dog manuals. She's learning Maggie's routine, becoming her memory." Another video, dated just 2 months before Jack's death, showed the full extent of Aurora's training. The dog would block Maggie from leaving the house without her coat. She'd alert when the stove was left on. She'd guide Maggie back home when she wandered into the yard confused. Most remarkably, Aurora had learned to bring Maggie specific items: her pills, her glasses, even the phone when it rang. "She's not just a pet anymore," Jack explained in what appeared to be his final recording, dated a week before his death. "Aurora is Maggie's lifeline. When I'm gone, Aurora will be all that stands between Maggie and complete deterioration. I should tell Sarah, but she'll want to put her mother in a home. Maggie made me promise no nursing homes. She wants to die in this house where we raised our family." The last video was different. Jack was in bed, pale and struggling to breathe, the warning signs of the heart attack nobody knew was coming. "If something happens to me," he wheezed, "Aurora knows what to do. I've arranged everything with Walter. He'll understand. The dog will take care of Maggie until someone figures it out. God forgive me for this burden I'm placing on that faithful animal." Sarah drove straight to Walter's house, the phone clutched like evidence of a crime. Walter was sitting in his living room, a box of papers spread across his coffee table. He looked up when she entered without knocking, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. "Your father was a good man," he said simply. He knew what was coming: his heart, Maggie's mind. He planned for it all. "You knew," Sarah's voice cracked with anger. "You knew Mom had dementia and you let her struggle alone." Walter pulled out an envelope from the box, worn from handling. "This is the letter Danny wrote from the hospital, the one I could never mail because he died before signing it." He handed it to Sarah with shaking hands. The letter was addressed to Aurora, of all things. Danny's handwriting, shaky from pain medication, filled 3 pages. "My faithful partner," it began. "If you're hearing this and knowing Dad, he'll read it to you. It means I didn't make it home. I need you to know you did everything right. You followed protocol. You protected Murphy when I couldn't. That 3rd bullet would have killed him. You took it for him, just like you were trained. Except I never trained you to do that. You chose to." The letter detailed Aurora's service record statistics that hadn't been in the official files. 47 drug busts, yes, but also 12 missing children found. 3 suicide interventions where Aurora had sensed distress and refused to leave potential victims alone. She'd saved Officer Murphy's marriage by alerting to his drinking problem. She'd detected cancer in 2 different suspects during pat-downs, leading to early treatment. "You never left anyone behind," Danny wrote. Not the kid in the meth house who everyone else wrote off. Not the dealer who overdosed. You stayed with him, kept him warm until the ambulance came. Not even me, partner. I know you wanted to follow me. I heard the nurses talking about how you tried to die too. But you didn't. Because that's not what we do. We protect and serve, even when it breaks our hearts. The final paragraph destroyed everyone who read it. "Mom and Dad think I'm going to make it, so I haven't told them my last wishes. If I don't survive, I want Aurora retired to Jack Lawson. He understands dogs like you, the working kind who need purpose. His wife is getting sick. He doesn't know I know, but cops notice things. Aurora, your last mission is to take care of Mrs. Lawson. Keep her safe like you kept me safe. And when she's gone, when your mission is complete, you can rest. You've earned it, partner. You've earned it 1,000 times over." Sarah was sobbing now, but Walter wasn't finished. He pulled out a bank statement. Danny left his life insurance to Aurora's care. $30,000 in a trust I was supposed to manage. I haven't touched it. Couldn't bear to acknowledge what it meant. "We have to help them," Sarah said suddenly. "Both of them, Mom and Aurora." "With what money?" Walter asked bitterly. "Your mother's house is mortgaged. Medicare doesn't cover what she needs. And Aurora, the surgery alone is $10,000. Sarah's face flushed with shame. She pulled out her own phone, showing Walter a bank balance. "Dad's life insurance. $100,000. I've been keeping it for her future care." I told myself. But really, I was keeping it so I wouldn't have to deal with the present. She looked at the number like it was an accusation. "I have power of attorney. Have had it for 6 months. Mom signed it during a lucid moment, then forgot. I never told anyone. You let her suffer while you sat on resources that could have helped." Walter's anger flared, then died just as quickly. "No. I'm no better. I watched from my window. We all failed them." That evening, an emergency meeting convened at the veterinary clinic. Dr. Chen presented his treatment plan for Aurora: extensive rehabilitation, possible additional surgeries, months of care. Grace Thompson proposed something unprecedented: therapy dog training specifically designed for dementia patients, with Aurora as the first graduate. "She already knows the work," Grace explained, referencing Jack's videos. "We just need to formalize it, make it medical, get insurance to cover it. Aurora could visit Maggie daily, maybe even stay with her during the day once we stabilize both their conditions." Tom Bradley, who'd been coordinating with state agencies, had discovered something remarkable. "There's a federal program for retired military and police canines. Full medical coverage if we can prove service-related injuries. Aurora qualifies 3 times over." Walter stood slowly, his decision made. "I own 40 acres behind my house. Danny and I were going to build a kennel there. Train service dogs for veterans." His voice grew stronger. "I want to do it now. Aurora's sanctuary. A place for retired working dogs and the people who need them." Sarah added her confession about the insurance money, offering it all for her mother's care and the sanctuary. "Dad would want this. Mom would want this if she could understand." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the revelations. Hidden videos revealing a husband's desperate love, a son's dying wish, a daughter's guilt transformed into action, an old man's grief becoming purpose, and at the center of it all, a dog who'd never stopped serving, even when forgotten and abandoned. Dr. Chen broke the silence with practical hope. "Aurora's responding to treatment. Her vital signs improved when we played a recording of Danny's voice from the letter. I believe she's been waiting for permission to live." Walter pulled out one final item from his box: Danny's service weapon, which he'd been allowed to keep. Danny would joke that Aurora was his real partner. The gun was just backup. He looked around the room at the small army of people ready to fight for one dog and one confused old woman. Aurora never needed backup, though. She just needed people to remember that she'd never stopped protecting and serving. Grace had been reviewing the videos on Jack's phone, pausing at one particular moment. "Look at this," she said, showing them footage from just days before Jack's death. Aurora was lying beside Maggie's chair while the elderly woman slept. The dog's eyes never closed, constantly vigilant, occasionally checking Maggie's breathing, adjusting position to keep her warm. "She chose this mission," Grace said quietly. "Even when it was killing her, she chose to stay." "Then we choose too," Ethan said firmly. "We choose to save them both." The agreement was drawn up that night. Sarah would return to Millbrook, manage her mother's care. Walter would build the sanctuary with Sarah's financial help and the town's volunteer labor. Grace would oversee Aurora's medical treatment and rehabilitation. The town would rally to support both Maggie and Aurora through whatever came next. As they signed papers and made plans, Aurora lay unconscious in recovery, her breathing finally steady. Somewhere across town, Maggie slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, mumbling in her dreams about a good dog who needed to come home. The flatline lasted 3 seconds. 3 seconds that felt like 3 years before Aurora's heart stuttered back to life. Weak, but persistent. Grace's hands flew across the emergency controls as the medical team rushed in. "She's fighting," Grace announced, voice thick with emotion. She heard Walter. "She's coming back." The recovery took months. January passed in a blur of small victories, Aurora lifting her head, taking her first steps, eating without coaction. The German shepherd who'd once been dying in the snow slowly transformed back into the noble animal she'd always been. Her black and tan coat grew glossy again, the ribs disappeared under healthy muscle, and most importantly, the desperate pleading left her amber eyes. Every morning at exactly 9 a.m., Walter would drive Aurora to Willowbrook Memory Care, where Maggie had been relocated. The facility, just 10 minutes from the Lawson farmhouse, had agreed to a pioneering therapy dog program with Aurora as its first participant. The routine never varied. Walter would walk Aurora through the automatic doors, past the reception desk where the staff now kept treats specifically for her, down the butter-yellow hallway to room 117. Maggie never remembered Aurora's name. Some days she called her the pretty dog, other days Jack's friend, occasionally that nice puppy. But every single morning, when Aurora placed her head on Maggie's lap, the elderly woman's hand would find the dog's fur instinctively, and she would smile. It was the same smile, confused but genuinely happy, that appeared nowhere else in her increasingly limited world. She slept through the night again. The day nurse would report to Walter. "She's calmer when she knows Aurora's coming." Thus, February brought legal clarity. Walter sat in the courthouse, Aurora beside him in her service vest, signing the official adoption papers. At 59, he was becoming a dog owner for the first time since Danny's childhood puppy 30 years ago. Aurora sat perfectly still during the ceremony, but her tail wagged when the clerk handed Walter the new registration tags with his name on them. Danny would be so proud. Patricia Hayes, Walter's sister-in-law, whispered from the gallery. "Danny is proud," Walter corrected softly, his hand resting on Aurora's head. The transformation of Walter's property began in March. What had been 40 acres of untended fields behind his house became Aurora's Haven Canine Sanctuary. Ethan led the construction crew, all volunteers from Millbrook and surrounding towns. They built kennels designed for comfort rather than containment, a medical facility where Grace could provide care, and a training ground for rehabilitation. "It's not just for retired canines," Walter explained to the local news crew in April. "It's for any working dog who needs peace after service. Police dogs, military dogs, service animals whose handlers have passed. They've given everything. They deserve dignity in their retirement." Sarah Mitchell's transformation was perhaps the most dramatic. The sharp Boston executive who'd arrived in December was gone, replaced by someone softer but stronger. She moved into the renovated Lawson farmhouse in May. turning it into both her home and an office for managing the sanctuary's growing operations. Her business skills, once used to avoid family responsibility, now ensured every donated dollar stretched to help another dog. "I'm still working," she explained to her bewildered Boston colleagues over Zoom. "Just for a different kind of profit now." By June, Guardian Angel Canine Rescue was fully operational. Ethan had partnered with Walter's Sanctuary, creating a pipeline from rescue to rehabilitation to retirement. 3 German Shepherds, all rescued from abandonment situations similar to Aurora's, were the first graduates. Each found homes with families who understood their trauma and committed to their healing. Grace Thompson provided all veterinary services pro bono, funded by a grant Sarah had written and submitted to a National Animal Welfare Foundation. "Aurora's story did this," Grace said, reviewing the approval letter. "Her suffering wasn't meaningless. It's saving others now." Summer passed in a rhythm of small miracles. Aurora learned to play again, chasing tennis balls with the enthusiasm of a puppy. Walter smiled regularly, something the town hadn't seen in 2 years. Sarah and Maggie had lunch together every Sunday, even though Maggie never quite knew who Sarah was. Ethan's rescue operations expanded to 3 neighboring counties. The sanctuary's first major success came in September. A military working dog named Rex, traumatized after his handler's death in Syria, arrived aggressive and untrusting. Aurora, now the sanctuary's unofficial therapy dog for other dogs, was introduced carefully. Within minutes, Rex recognized something in her, perhaps the shared understanding of loss, perhaps the authority of her service. He followed her everywhere, calming in her presence. Within a month, Rex was placed with a veteran in Maine who needed him as much as Rex needed a purpose. October brought unexpected joy. Sarah, while organizing her father's papers, discovered Jack had been writing a book about training dogs for dementia care. His notes, combined with Aurora's success story, became the foundation for a formal training program. 3 young German Shepherds began training as dementia service dogs, with Aurora as their model and Walter as their instructor. November was bittersweet. Maggie's condition had declined to the point where she rarely had lucid moments, but Aurora never missed a morning visit. The dog would lie beside Maggie's bed for exactly 1 hour, patient and protective, asking nothing in return for her presence. Sometimes Maggie would pet her, sometimes she wouldn't, but Aurora's tail would wag gently either way. Then came Christmas Eve, 1 year after that desperate night when Aurora escaped to save Maggie. The memory care facility's common room had been transformed. A 12-foot tree dominated one corner, decorated with ornaments made by local school children. Each ornament bore the name of a rescued dog from the past year. Sarah hung the last one, a small silver badge with Aurora engraved on it. Maggie sat in her wheelchair near the tree, wearing a soft red sweater Sarah had brought. She didn't recognize the sweater or the daughter who'd given it to her, but she smiled at the lights. Aurora lay beside her, the German Shepherd's head resting on Maggie's feet, a position that allowed her to monitor Maggie while still watching the room. Walter sat in the chair next to Maggie, reading aloud from Jack's letter stories about their courtship that made Maggie laugh even though she didn't remember them. His voice had lost the broken quality it held a year ago. Danny's photo was in his shirt pocket, but it no longer weighed him down. Ethan arrived with 3 German Shepherds from the rescue, all wearing Christmas bandanas, all destined for sanctuary placement after the holidays. They settled near Aurora, recognizing her as their alpha. One, a young female named Hope, pressed against Aurora's side. Aurora's tail thumped approval. Grace brought cookies she'd baked, wearing a sweater with paw prints that she'd have been embarrassed by in her previous life. She checked Aurora's surgical site 1 year later. It had healed into a badge of honor rather than a wound. Sarah decorated while managing 3 phone calls about sanctuary donations, her efficiency now channeled toward purpose rather than avoidance. She'd gained weight, lost the sharp edges, found peace in the chaos of small-town life. The Millbrook Elementary Choir arrived at 6, filing in with their parents to sing carols. When they began Silent Night, Maggie started humming along, her hand finding Aurora's fur in the familiar rhythm of comfort. Aurora's eyes, once so desperate and pleading, now gazed around the room with contentment. She wasn't begging for life anymore, she was celebrating it. "Look at her," Grace whispered to Ethan. "She knows she's home." "They both do," Walter added, watching Maggie smile at something only she could see, perhaps Jack, perhaps just the tree lights, but smile nonetheless. As snow began falling outside, visible through the large windows, Sarah made an announcement. "The Aurora Fund has reached $100,000. That's enough to train 20 service dogs for dementia patients. 20 Auroras for 20 Maggies." The room erupted in gentle applause, careful not to startle the residents. Aurora lifted her head, tail wagging, amber eyes bright with something that looked remarkably like pride. Maggie's hand found Aurora's head, patting gently. "Good dog," she said clearly, the same word she'd said a year ago in crisis. But now they carried peace instead of desperation. Aurora's tail wagged harder. After everything, the neglect, the surgery, the long recovery, the daily service that asked nothing in return, she'd found what she'd been searching for. Not just survival, but purpose. Not just rescue, but family. Not just duty, but love. The Christmas lights reflected in Aurora's eyes as she settled back beside Maggie. No longer a dog begging for life, but one who'd learned that sometimes saving others is how we save ourselves. And in that warm room, surrounded by the unlikely family tragedy had created, Aurora closed her eyes and rested, knowing her watch would continue tomorrow, and the next day, and every day after. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. Outside, the snow fell on Millbrook, covering the memories of suffering with the promise of fresh starts. While inside, love persisted without memory, and hope lived in the gentle thump of a German shepherd's tail against the floor. I need to tell you something about that winter in Millbrook, something that took me years to understand. We thought we were saving Aurora and Maggie, but that's not what really happened. They saved us from something worse than cold or hunger. They saved us from forgetting how to see each other. You see, every one of us was chained to something invisible. Walter to his grief, Sarah to her guilt, Ethan to his past failure, me to my comfortable distance from other people's pain. We'd all built these careful walls, calling them privacy, calling them respect, calling them anything but what they were, fear of feeling too much. But Aurora never learned to build walls. Even dying, she kept watch. Even forgotten, she stayed faithful. She showed us that family isn't about blood or memory, it's about showing up when showing up hurts. Maggie, lost in her confusion, still worried about feeding the nice dog. Love persisted even when the mind couldn't hold its shape. That's what gratitude really is, not saying thank you, but refusing to let go. Sometimes the only difference between abandonment and family is one person brave enough to say, "This suffering is mine to share."